Okay, so my name is Jeff Schuman. I'm a managing director here at Solution Street. And as I mentioned, we're going to talk about some AI-powered coding tools tonight. My experience in this field, I've used ChatGPT, I've used GitHub Copilot a lot. So I know GitHub Copilot. And I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, then we have 4 different presentations. And there we go. So by way of agenda, I'm going to do sort of an intro and an overview. Then we have 4 different tools that are going to be discussed. And then I'm going to come back and do a wrap up at the end. Okay. So I love The Simpsons. So I tried to figure out what might be a good example of a AI powered coding tool from The Simpsons. This was probably the best scene I could remember from there, with Mr. Burns showing them 1,000 monkeys working on 1,000 computers. Actually, it was typewriters at the time, but I don't know what should do now. They were supposed to type out Shakespeare, and one of them typed out "to be or not to blee," and Mr. Burns was very upset about that. So I found a recent survey about AI tools, and what we found and why this is important. We found 81% of developers are currently using a coding assistant. And as you might imagine, the most popular use is to learn something new, learn a new technical skill. ChatGPT is the most popular assistant, though I would question how much of ChatGPT is used for coding assistance versus just other sort of chat assistants with other questions. This one I thought was higher than I would have thought, which is 49%, or about 50% of developers these days use an assistant every single day. And the biggest concern, at least at the time I wrote it, Steve had something else, was the quality of the code that was being produced. Again, my experience is Copilot. I found it very useful, especially when I haven't done something in a really long time. I haven't written a Python script in a long time. I need to, get a little bit of help in just getting started, or I'm trying to learn something new. And so I've used ChatGPT and Copilot, and they're both really helpful in just getting started with something new. So as by way of an overview, this is a discussion and demonstration of 4 of the most popular AI-assisted coding tools. The goal here is to just kind of give you an overview of the key features and facts. It's not really to declare a winner or the best tool, because that's really dependent upon your particular use case and situation and what you're trying to do and who your stakeholders are in the whole situation. We're going to discuss each tool, and what we tried to do, the 4 presenters helped out a lot here in a comparison chart. Okay, so this is an empty chart right now, and the whole point here is tonight, over the course of the evening, we're going to fill this up. And so each tool will talk about functionality, we'll talk about integration and ease of use, security and privacy, and pricing and licensing, and there'll be some demos and some interesting things you're going to see. But at the end of the evening, we'll have a chart here that's essentially all filled up, and you won't be able to read it on the screen. It'll be too small, but we're going to have basically an artifact that you'll be able to download for yourself, either in the meetup group, if we can figure out how to do an attachment there, or we'll have a link to it from the Solution Street website where you can get the filled in version of this chart. I'll show after the last talk, I'll sort of show you it all filled in. So our first presenter is Vikas, and he's going to come over and he's going to talk about ChatGPT.
All right, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for your patience. This is pretty usual, right? Whenever you want to do a Zoom meeting, no matter how much you have tried, there is something going to go wrong. So thank you. So this is me. First of all, let me just start with some introductions. My name is Vikas Grover. I'm based in Herndon, Virginia, very local to this area. And that's my book that I published last year, through Packet Publishing. It was on hybrid cloud. So good ratings, you can go check it out. Of course, I do IT consulting and helps various clients. I've worked for local Freddie Mac as well. I was just telling somebody, and various other clients, including telco customers. In my part-time, I also help local groups, non-profits, and organizations to make an impact by building tools for them using low-code technology, so that less coding, more business outcome. So we, build fundraising application. We build, tools like how to do, mail-in ballots and stuff, and campaigns for, your whatever organization you are running. So that's something that I enjoy doing. after that, let's go on to the topic of the day, AI for coding and developmental work. Now, how many of you do coding? Nice, pretty hands-on group, right? And how many you enjoy doing the coding? Right? That's a tricky question. So anyway, so I think AI for coding and development work is getting really, really popular. We just saw the stats that Jeff brought up, like mostly pretty much anybody and everybody is into finding some sort of assistance when doing coding, right? And I think, this is what Amazon published some time back about their work, that the productivity they have achieved by doing AI in the development side of the world, right? So if you think about it for a second, Gen AI is of course the shiny ball everybody's after right now. It's the hottest topic, but struggling to find a use case, right? Everybody's trying to find what can we do with Gen AI, but this definitely is a use case that Gen AI has found, and it is definitely being used by IT companies as well as we, the developers. So, a pretty useful use of Gen AI. I'm going to get into the topic of the ChatGPT, but I wanted to show you how, people are using it, companies are using it. And as you can see, if they feel this is the amount of productivity they are gaining, so their investment in this area is only going to increase. I also want to show you something else, which will be pretty eye-opening for you. This is Instruct Lab. Now, this is another open source project which you can go to today on GitHub and download. It's a CLI, command line interface. What does the Instruct Lab do? It's basically when you have a laptop and you want a model, what do? Well, you say you don't have enough resources. So Instruct Lab, when you download that, you basically can chat with the model. You can also tune the model, and then it does synthetic data generation, which means that you give like 5 or 7 samples of data, and it will generate thousands of samples based on that sample that you provide. So which means that to do instructional training of the model, you do not have to find or struggle to find a lot of data, so you can tune it. You can just give like 7, 8, 10 samples, and it will say, okay, this is the kind of a data you want me to train. I'll go and train. Why I'm telling you this is also because by using Instruct Lab, just like how AWS or Amazon did that work, and the CEO of Andy was mentioning about how productive that tool has been, same way IBM used Instruct Lab to build coding assistance tool. And what that tool did, without when you don't use a coding assistance, of course, they got a lot of mainframe, it's a lot of COBOL, which they want to migrate to Java because some clients decide to move away from mainframe stuff. And to do that, normally it takes them 9 months, 14 iteration, yada yada, a lot of time, a lot of effort. But when used Instruct Lab, it took them 1 week and one iteration basically to do the whole migration of COBOL to Java. Basically, what's happening, as you can imagine, is the model is learning and then producing the outcome in Java for you, saving us, the developers, all that effort. That's what's happening, right? So that was the reason I was sharing that with you. So Amazon is doing it, so is IBM doing it, and I'm sure so many other companies are doing that as well. So this is real. Now, with that said, I did looked into ChatGPT. I'm sure this is probably the tool that everybody has used it, right? I should ask the other way. Anybody who has not used ChatGPT? There you go. Well, thank you. That's interesting. I wouldn't have guessed it. So anyway, so most of the people have used ChatGPT, and it's the ChatGPT has code assist capabilities. You can try them. It's based on GPT-4 architecture, which is developed by OpenAI. Now, you may have used it for your coding techniques. I think it's very, very beneficial when you use ChatGPT. People who are doing, Google Sheets, or you, like Jeff was mentioning, want to use a quick Python code for doing something, move a file from place X to place Y, and you're a business analyst or a project manager. Now you don't have to go ask ask favors. You can probably use ChatGPT and it can, spit the code for you. So it comes with various features, and I'm going to talk about them, but it comes with integration into VS Code or IntelliJ or Eclipse. And then there are, let me go into this. So if you go to VS Code and you say, I want an extension for ChatGPT, you will find tons of these extensions, right? And more getting developed almost on a daily, weekly basis, fast moving, space. What does that mean is you can try any extension, of course, that you want to, but that doesn't mean that will always give you the result that you are hoping to get from it. Make sure when you download an extension, you go and check their GitHub or their website and see when was the last time they updated. Developers get bored. They do some things, they release it, and then they are like, fine, I'm going to move on to the next one. So you don't want to be, so for example, this one right here, may not be useful. They're not updating it anymore, right? What I used was Genie AI, right? Which I thought was pretty useful. And then there are more too, right? Like if you go enterprise AI or assist AI, and then you have to pay for them, per seat or per user. But Genie AI is pretty useful. And what you have to do is you definitely have to swipe your credit card after like couple of queries that you will do. I don't know if you're familiar. You guys are familiar with tokens and how OpenAI charges you, right? So anytime you put a query, this is basically a token. You make a query, you get a result back, and you will be running out of your free version. Then, which means that now is the time to pay for querying the system. So my credit card gets swiped for doing that. So let's get to the demo. And I'm going to show you very quickly what I did and give you a briefing on it. I think how much time I have, like 5-7 minutes, maybe. Okay. Okay. So here is my VS Code, and where is my Genie AI? Here is my Genie AI. Now, I would say it's pretty useful. I'll give some warning right up front. If you are a developer and you want to do something, of course, your first place is going to be, let's go, start with doing this sort of assistance through Genie AI or whatever tool of your choice may be. But if you have to put that in production, keep in mind the code can go wrong for various reasons, that may mean even functional reason. And if you don't have any idea what you wrote because ChatGPT wrote it for you, you're going in big trouble. So the trouble is yours. So make sure, even if you're using the assistance, try to understand what is it getting produced. And I think, like Jeff was mentioning, quality is the, biggest concern when using, such tools. The other concern is not able to understand the functionality that is being implemented by code and releasing that all the way to production. And then you probably may move on or may be on the project, but have no idea what is running there. It just produced the outcome that you were hoping for. And that will not be a very kind situation to be in. Anyways, so I was talking about the Genie. This has got a couple of views. One of the view is a conversation view, very useful. You ask a question, it's going to give you a response back. The other view is, also similar to like you type what you want to type, write me code, blah blah, and then it does changes, get more precise answer, get more balanced answer, get more creative answer. So it starts to vary the model to, based on your question, you can actually change the temperature of it and see how the answer varies for you. So I thought that was a pretty useful feature. Second of all, as you can see here, you have various shortcuts, which are very, handy. Commit message, add a test, find a problem in the code, optimize your code, explain the code, add your comments, or complete the code. So these are also, pretty useful feature. I'm going to show you something very quickly, which whatever code you are seeing here on the right-hand side is a JavaScript code. Now, let me see. I got it. So what am I doing is I'm asking my Genie that using JavaScript, how do I create an API endpoint for an HTTP server that converts currencies by fetching real-time exchange rate from a third-party service, and it should accept two currency codes and an amount to be converted. So if you see, it's quite a few set of instructions or code I'm asking, and the moment I send it, it starts to give me very step-by-step instructions and also write the complete code for me, which then I can obviously decide to copy or insert on my JS file. So if you think about it as a developer, you get started, you get boot started, right? You give an instruction and the code starts to come. This code that's on the right-hand side is exactly what I used, with the help of Genie AI. And in the first go itself, it worked. It gave me the result that I was looking for. I'll just kind of bring it up for the sake of discussion. The server is running, and what did I do? Invalid currency code. Well, of course, it has to do it here, right? When I was doing it at home, it was working just fine. So anyway.
All caps.
All caps. So yeah, so if you see, what I'm trying to actually demonstrate is, you know, quite a few instructions given and a zero bug and an output comes out of it. Would say pretty useful, right? You get started, and then not only that, it also gives pretty step by step of what do you need to do. You need to install the necessary packages. You gotta do run so and so commands. You gotta run so and so commands to see the output. So for somebody like a beginner or even a mid-level person, it saves a lot of time, very productive. Secondly, if I switch to other thing, and I want to add test, which I thought was very by the way, do your code, learn how to write code, and now who likes to write test cases and who likes to do a code coverage, right? Pretty much nobody, not even the QA analyst does. He does. So the Genie AI from that perspective is pretty useful, or ChatGPT for that matter, because it just wrote test cases for you. And then if you think about it, that is a real productivity, because while as a project manager or program manager, Jeff may be worried that my team is writing all this code and deploying in production, but for test cases point of view, it might be a really unobjectionable thing, because it's a good thing, right? You're getting your code coverage done. So that's definitely very, very helpful.
Misinterpreted your requirement, it's your
There's-
wrong code and the wrong test case.
That's always there. That's always going to be there, even with the humans. But yeah, I do agree. But at least it's a area where we or developers get fatigued of finding those coverages, and a tool would help to a good extent. But yeah, cannot deny that. Yes.
Have you run the generated tests and do you know what the coverage is? I know it's a small piece of code, so.
Yeah, I would say I did in earlier time, not on this one, but I would say 70 to.
Repeat the question when someone asks.
Okay, gotcha. So the question essentially is, what does it give a full coverage of the code? And I think the response to that is you have to give more prompts if you feel like it hasn't done a good job in the first go. I think it like any AI tool, it does a pretty decent job of improving as you give better prompts, and say that you have missed, or I would like you to give me more coverages. Yeah.
If you go back to your index.js, I think you still might have highlighted what you said to test.
Yeah.
Right? You only.
Yeah.
You said generate a test for this.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you may have to do several of those for tests, but Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, by the way. Yeah, you decide. So for example, if I want it to explain me this part of code, so it's going to explain me the selected part of the code explanation, right? And so as like with add comments or complete code. And be creative is the temperature that I have set. One more thing I should show you, by the way, which you will probably find interesting. When I come on the settings of it, you can actually also decide the model that you want to use, which I thought was very useful, right? Drop down, choose the model that you would like to work with and have little variations. Even give a URL for Azure if you have if you want to use that. So I think so you can look into settings, but I think this was pretty useful that you have all these customization options available to you on VS Code, and you can choose the model that you would like and make the changes or give the what do you say, add comments, complete code, all of these things are available for you. The conversation view is actually very, very useful. If I can switch back to that in the editor, because you can see the conversational history also. So yeah, this is the conversational view, and I can go back and check the history of my, what happened before, which means that it kind of helps with the productivity. Now, like, I think I might be running out of time. What else I wanted to cover? Let me see if I'm forgetting anything or not, but pretty much, yeah. So I think I definitely like three things of this tool. Number one is you can do a lot of configuration with it. You can change the model as you would like, which I think is very, very useful. Number two is unit tests. That's the part I definitely enjoyed. The third one is that you have these views, conversation view, as well as, the editor view with predefined things, which makes the tool really productive as well. Now, as you get into more and more complex stuff, it will, I would say, you have to keep in mind the better your prompts are, the chances of your code writing are going to get better based on that. But the more complex it is, the more challenges you will start to face. But it is still a pretty useful tool. Now, I don't know if you want to cover those things right now or in the end, the chart that we showed, but it's GDPR compliant and CCPA compliant. We'll look into those nuances at the end of the discussion. Anything else?
The question, but before you said the code worked the first time, which never happens, right? But you put in the URL that didn't work, because if you pasted that URL into Genie, said, why doesn't this URL work? Would it be?
Very good question. I think it would have known that. We can try actually. I mean, to be honest with you, but I don't know why it didn't work. It did give me the. It was my mistake, by the way, the manual error. I probably missed something.
Okay, you have the question case. Yeah.
Please repeat the question.
Oh, I got a dispute. If I in the very beginning, when I executed that URL, there was an error. So definitely the error and the URL was incorrect. So the question is, if I would have taken that particular URL and fed it back to Genie, do you think it would have given me an answer? What is wrong with it? And my answer is positive. It would have done that. It would have, if I would have prompted it in a right way, am I giving the right URL? It would have done that. Yeah. So let's see. Just gonna try that. Let's just. It says here the error in the URL you provided is due to a missing equal sign between amount and the value. The correct string should look blah blah blah. So it keeps that in the context. It has that in the memory, doesn't store it for security or compliance reasons. But for the session, it does have the context. So yeah. All right.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think so. What happens is this is so. Okay, repeat the question. Repeat the question. What so the question essentially is why doesn't it store the information, and what does have to do with compliance? That's the question, right? So essentially when they take the information and store it, basically then they are learning from, probably our own data, which may be for a company or a proprietary stuff. So it be just to be on the safe side, or to follow the compliance. They want to make sure that they are not storing anything. They just use it and then it's gone. All right. Okay, then.
This question would go to all of the presenters. So you just typed in a query and then it generated code. Could you paste in like 8 different files from from a Go package? And then are these tools now smart enough where you could say, hey, in file number B, file number 2, does this make sense compared to file number 7? Because can this now work across multiple files?
So your question is, if I take file number 1 and upload it, right? And then I upload a file number 2, right? Can I ask questions about, that does it make sense in file 1 compared to file number 2? Basically, I'm kind of talking across files and asking questions to ChatGPT. Yes, I think I have tried few things. So I have fed ChatGPT few documents related to code manuals. And then I have fed my code to ChatGPT and asked, am I following, so and so things which are in that manual? And I have gotten some responses which I would say were 70 to 80%. It does, you can upload a document, as you may be familiar, or upload a manual to ChatGPT, and then you can actually ask a question. And I think behind the scenes, it might be using RAG, right? When we upload a document, it's using RAG technology, which is out of the scope of this conversation, but you can extend or enhance the model by retrieval augmented generation RAG technique. So it takes that and it starts to embed that data, and basically it can read that document and compare with your question that you have. Okay. All right. I gotta go. I guess I'm getting a timeout. So thank you so much, guys. Stay in touch.
Cool. All right, so I am doing my presentation on Claude.ai. So a little background information about me is I've been a software engineer for about 10 years now. I've been, software engineering, I've been a tech lead, I've been an IT manager, so I've kind of split my time between those different roles throughout the years. I've been using AI tools for about a year. I've used ChatGPT, I've used Claude.ai, which is what I'm demoing today, and then I've also used Copilot. So it's been very interesting. They all kind of have perks and, pluses and minuses. And kind of what Jeff was saying earlier today, I don't think, at least from my experience, there's not really a best, like a best AI, one that just simply wins. I think a lot of it comes to the type of things that it lets you do, and the structure of it, the pricing models, the security, and all of that is kind of important. And then from there on, it seems kind of like preference to me. And I've kind of compared and contrasted myself. I have my own opinions, but that's kind of what this is all about, is just seeing what these things can do and to see potentially which of these is best, the best tool for you. And by the way, when people were asking questions, since I was remote, I couldn't hear the questions very well. So I think if there will be questions, you'll have to talk either really loud or get close to it so that I can hear it, and then I'll restate it like the other one. So cool. So this one, I'm trying to keep this pretty realistic. I'm going to try to show some scenarios of like realistic-ish but simplified use cases for how you might use this tool and how you might do it specifically in Claude. So from that little matrix that we had for the grid, I wanted to just go over like one or two that you won't naturally see addressed, but the rest of them you will. So in terms of Claude, right now I'm logged in. This is a website. It's a typical kind of like you'd see in ChatGPT. There is there's no extension specifically offered for Claude. So if you ever wanted to integrate it into an IDE, you would use something similar to what the previous presentation showed, where you basically have some third-party thing that you're providing an API key from Claude, and then it's basically sending your stuff out to Claude to get a response, and then integrating it back into the IDE. I personally haven't done that, and the reason I haven't is more just from a pricing perspective, and then also I'm not super confident in the security of like this third-party app capturing all of my stuff and then sending it out, and that's just something I just didn't want to deal with personally in terms of security, so I just never messed with it, but it is an option. In terms of what this type of stuff does in terms of prompting, basically from a paid plan, everything you put in here is not shared anywhere. Is not fed back into the LLM to be used as future prompts for other people that aren't me. You have the capability as well of basically telling Claude that all of your previous chats that you'd like to delete them. And when you do, it will set a counter for up to 30 days. And by the 30th day, all of your prompts and your responses are completely deleted from the server, from Claude server, and it simply never existed. So that's kind of cool in the sense that you can guarantee if you want to and you delete it, that it will never exist and it will be gone forever, which I think is pretty cool. And the rest of the matrix will just naturally kind of appear as we go. So yeah, really quick in here, pretty simple interface. You have a chat here. I'm actually going to explore this concept of a project, and I'll explain kind of what this is as we go. I'm going to create a project and what you're trying to achieve. This is more just for your own informative stuff. I'll just say it's a demo. What's cool about a demo or a project that is not always super common, at least in other AI tools, is this kind of becomes its own little ecosystem of chats. So right here, you can see on the right where you have this concept of project knowledge, and you get two things that you can do. The first thing is you can set up instructions. So inside of here, you're basically telling Claude how it should respond and how it should behave in all of the chats focused within this project. It's really cool because I don't know if anyone has seen, but for example, in ChatGPT, there's these things called like custom GPT models, which are basically a way to give like almost like an additional layer of things that the AI will filter it through before it goes in and produces a result. So you can basically kind of tell it what it should be looking for, how it should act. If you want it to be succinct, if you want it to repeat code as it prints out and kind of instruct how it should refer and talk to you, which is super powerful because a lot of tools, you just get what they get and you don't have any control. So this gives you a huge potential of kind of adjusting how you prefer it to be. So for simplicity's sake, I already pre-constructed something. I'm just going to paste it in so you don't have to sit here and watch me type. But basically I said, you're an expert in software engineering with a focus on maintainable, well-designed code. And you review your answers to ensure that you're answering the correct question. This is something I put in there because I've seen often with these tools, you'll get this thing where it'll just essentially like almost like it ignored your questions, just talking about whatever it feels like talking about. And including this line has reduced that drastically to the point where it's almost always referring to exactly what I want it to. And this is something else, it's just a preference of mine too. I said you'll never make assumptions unless you think they're beneficial beyond my original ideas. If you make an assumption, you always highlight it in the code and message me why you made that assumption. And that's again something that's kind of me trying to correct some of these tools behaviors where I want it to do what I want it to do. If it thinks there's a better idea, do it, but tell me that you did it and tell me you altered something, just so that I don't get this crazy code and I have to message back and be like, why did you make this code do this? That's not at all what it's supposed to do, right? And I want it to be aware of that. So this is mine. Again, you can always alter it, but I'll save the instructions here. And now you can see right here, and you can always go back and modify them if you want to refine it and do something more specific. You also have the ability to add content to your project. So content is basically anything that you want to be understood within any chat at any moment. So for example, if I click this, you can upload from a device. So you can basically upload TS files, HTML files, CSS files, documents, PDFs, like anything you essentially want. And it will integrate it in here as the project knowledge. So then contextually, when you're working with it, it will understand whatever you intentionally tell it to understand, which is very cool as well, because a lot of tools, it'll kind of update its context as it goes, but you don't get the granularity of saying, I only want you to know about this. And when I no longer want you to know about this, you can remove it from the knowledge and it won't know about it anymore. So you have granular control. You might argue the downside there is that you do have to be adamant about making sure that what you're telling it is updated and relevant for what you want, right? It's kind of like a pros and cons. It's not always easy either way. For this, I'm just going to do something silly. I'm just going to say like, let's see. I'm just going to say what I'm currently doing. I'm saying I'm building a website starting with a login page. And then, I'll just call it the start. So you can see right here, it appends like a project knowledge. I can click on it and it'll say what I've said. I can trash it if I want to. And what's kind of cool about this as well is you can upload, I think the limitation is about 500 currently pages of data per project. And it'll say right here, like how much size I've used. So you can upload a lot if you wanted to, or you can upload nothing at all. It's sort of up to you. And to kind of make sure Claude is understanding what I'm talking about, I have another prompt I'm going to start here. And I'm going to say, please review and confirm all of my project knowledge I've given you. That includes the instructions I've given you and the purpose of this project. So I'm basically asking it, hey, do you know what I told you to do? Tell me back so I know that you know what it is. And I send the first instruction. And you can see it's a combination of both what I wanted it to do and the knowledge that it has. It knows I'm building a website and then I'm starting with a login page. It knows that I'm looking for software engineering with a focus on this, which I think for me personally is important. I want it maintainable. I want it well designed. I want this thing to live as long as it can. It knows I need it to review its answers, and it knows it should not make assumptions. So you can see that now with every question I go through, it feeds back through all of this knowledge, the prompts that I've set up and how I instructed it to behave, as well as knowing the context of what I've given it. So I will give an example. And again, I'm copy pasting stuff from, like what I've previously written just because I don't want you to be bored with my typing and just physically typing. And again, this is not like it's re-pulling information that I've already done because each one of these chats is exclusive and there's no context between chats unless it's within a project. And none of this gets fed back into the LLM. So I have something, and this is supposedly sort of like a realistic scenario. This is kind of, imagine as a developer, you get a screen mock-up, okay? Someone on a UI team goes, hey, Matt, I want this login component to look like this. Can you start building it? So I go, I wonder if AI can build this thing for me. Let's see what it can do, right? So I'm telling you, I've attached an image of a login modal that is centered in the web page. Can you please create an HTML in a single file and use CSS exclusively to format the HTML? And then I will take the picture that my UI designer gave me and I'll attach it. And if I click on it, you can see. So, quite simple, nothing fancy. And I say go. So, it's basically generating it. And I'll explain kind of a little bit how this UI works. It's pretty nifty. It's quite intuitive. It has certainly some perks. So how it kind of splits it is on the left is the chat. It will highlight code snippets that it writes in terms of this block, kind of like a little link. And as you click it on the right side, that will open up your code that it's referencing here. So it's kind of separating words from code. It kind of, like a lot of the times, like, I don't want to read what is like, I want to read the code, right? Like, I don't want to have to, sift through all of this unless I need to. A lot of times I want the code. So here it gives you, the preview of the code. You can scroll up, you can copy it. What's pretty cool about Claude too is that there's a preview tab where it's actually capable of actually rendering your HTML. So this is actually what was rendered in that code. And I've, like, again, I could prove it. I could paste it in and rename it to an HTML file. I've done it plenty of times. It's accurate. So this is basically exactly what this thing looked like. So it's pretty cool. You get code and you get to see what it looks like. And I haven't done anything yet, right? Like I haven't even put a stroke on a keyboard. So at this point though, I look at it and I'm like, okay, you know, like I'm not gonna write this in like vanilla HTML and CSS, right? Like not super modern. So instead I'm gonna say, you know, let's do something a little different. I want you now to create the same thing, but I want you to use React and Tailwind CSS instead of writing handwritten CSS. So let's see what happens, and I'll prompt it. So here on the right, it is now printing out the React code. And you can scroll through here and you can see all of these class names are now using Tailwind CSS. So there's no, you know, in this file, there's no actual CSS specifically written here. And when I go to the preview tab, magically, this can also render React code. So this is actually the React code itself being rendered and Tailwind also being rendered, which is pretty cool. So now you can kind of see what this actual, you know, modal looks like without having to keep copy, pasting, reload app, and kind of get a concept of essentially what's happening. I'll pause for a second too. I know I've been talking a lot, so I don't know if there are questions thus far. I'll just pause for 5 seconds. If I hear nothing, I'll continue. Okay. So I look at this and I'm like, like I know that, you know, the UI designers want this, but I'm like, I don't know. I feel like it could look cooler, right? So I put in another post and I go, can you add your own creative flair to make this login page look more flashy, modern, but with the reserved color palette? So I prompt it. And then it reprints out the code on the right. And now we have this. And you can see it actually has some like minor animations that's included. So again, on the right here, it's still using React, it's still using Tailwind, and it's rendering the preview of this thing, including things like animations inside of it. So now another feature, there's this chat control here. I can click this and it will show me all the artifacts currently in this chat. So the first one here was, you know, the HTML I had. This one right here was the Tailwind with CSS. And this one is the new one that I basically said like, hey, make this fancy, right? And then it also lists your project content. I've got that start file and the instructions I gave it, as well as the image that I put in. So I'm going to do like 1 or 2 more small iterations, and then I'll show something else. So for this one here now, I'm going to go, can you add a password field too, right? Because this was a login page, but it just had an email or a phone number, right? But it needs a password. So I said, please follow the same styling as well. So I'm basically instructing it, hey, make it look just like that. I'm not giving it a new picture. I'm just saying I need a password, make it look like it belongs, and we'll see what it does. Okay. You know, it says on the left too, it'll give some information. You know, I probably shouldn't just fully brush over it, but it kind of explains, you know, what it's been doing, all of the changes it's been making. And then kind of like in the previous one, it's saying, you know, like I'm using this specific package. Here's how you install it. You know, this is what you'll have to set up. So I preview this now and look, all of a sudden now we have a password field as well. So again, I've done nothing, right? I gave it a picture and I said, do cool stuff and make it look better and use Tailwind, and it's done a great job thus far. Is this production ready code? Yeah, probably not, right? But the concept here is sort of it gets things there quicker. It can help you learn. It can help you kind of figure out some of the design stuff. And something that's very powerful with this, if you design your own component, you put in the blood, sweat, and tears to build like the first page of your login. If you send that login component into here and then you're like, hey, here's my component, here's the HTML. I love how it's styled. I like the design patterns I've used. Here's a new picture of something I want. Follow exactly the same type of patterns that I've already given you on this one. And it is phenomenal at replicating similar ideas and preferences and patterns from something that you may have handwritten in the first place, and keeping the code consistent and spinning it up so it looks almost as if you wrote the second one because it had reference of the first one off of a picture, right? You're just giving it another picture and saying, do stuff that was similar to the first one and make it look like this, right? Yeah, so now that we're here, you can see as it starts doing iterations and I'm making modifications, you'll see there's now a version counter down here. I can actually now toggle back through the different variations of the code that it's made, and it tries to automatically group it. So for example, this had no password. I click next, it has a password, right? So that was the second version. You can see your code. I can toggle here and see there's one version of the HTML and CSS. There's one version of just the React, and then there's two versions when it got enhanced. So you can kind of start seeing the difference here as it evolves. So to wrap this one up, there's a button down here at the bottom that says add to current project. So now I can click this, and I'm going to now abandon this specific chat, and I want to start a new one. And you can see here in the project knowledge, it now has that exact piece of code that I added here in its context via the button that I pressed. And now I can ask it too, like if I wanted, like for example, I start a new chat and I'm like, please show me my current login modal and let me preview it. So now it just basically pulls it right out of the memory that I essentially added it to. And now this chat knows about it. And that's kind of important because again, with Claude, context does not transition between chats. Each chat is an open world unless you assemble that knowledge on the project, in which case every chat within a project understands the context. So I think I'm pretty much out of time, but I'll do one last realistic-ish scenario. So here's another kind of cool concept. Imagine that you got this this requirement from, you're building an API, let's say. It's for books, it's for a library, and you got these requirements from, your business system analysts, and they're basically like, hey, like I've got, like I know you've got these fields, you've got these types, this is what its type is in the database, this is if it's required or not, and these are the formatting rules for each of the fields where certain thresholds of above or below, need to be matched so it fits in the database. The data is, relevant, I guess. So eventually this would map to, a UI probably at some point. So I took this and I made it basically a CSV. So I took what theoretically an analyst gave me. I'm copying like the CSV right here. I'll go back to my chat, and I have like a pre-written chat again just to save us time. But basically I'm saying, hey, I want you to write a class named book that represents this data. So all I did is, literally just pasted this in like this. And I said, please write validation class for book using fluent validation. So I'm being explicit, telling it which technology and which concept or framework I want it to use or library when it does this. So I hit it. So now it starts printing out the code. And, here's the book class. It matches with all of the types as specified in that, CSV/Excel doc. It wrote a validation class, and you can see it actually did grab everything from literally just the CSV, the length requirements with messages that represent the same thing. Same for the author. Here it's writing a regex to say, 0 to 9 with 13 characters with a length of 13. Perfect. That's exactly what it said. Right here, again, it needs to be between, for a book here, between 0 BC and today, this year, because it obviously can't have a book in the future. And a book summary, notice how it doesn't say not empty. It says maximum length 500, which basically is saying that this thing has a max length, but it is not required, which is exactly what this said, right? This was the only field that was not required, and all the rest of them say not empty. So this is actually completely valid. This would actually totally work as is. I converted, created a class, created validation, and now from the following, the previous presentation, right? Writing unit tests, right? So I'm going to then go in, and this is almost a conclusion. I'm basically saying, please write unit tests using X unit. So I'm being explicit again. I don't just want to say write unit tests. It might use anything, right? You got to tell it exactly what it should do. And then include a test for each property's edge case, as well as failing cases beyond the edges. So I'm being very explicit what I want it to test. If you just say, write me tests, You might get something, you might not, you might get half the tests you want, right? So it's all about being very explicit. So I paste this in, and it's coming up and writing a validation class. We'll see how accurate it is, because sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not great. So here we go. It looks like it's basically writing positive cases and negative cases for each of these tests. And I'm very familiar with the like the actual, structure of this specific library, and this actually is valid code. I can't review all of the tests individually to say they're certainly all valid, but in general, it looks like, yes, I would assume they probably are valid. And then one last iteration, I'm like, okay, I know in this library X unit, like you can say fact and write all of these tests over and over again, but notice how it says should fail validation when more than 13. And then there's another should fail validation when non-digits. So there's multiple should fails for each test. And I know that Fluent Validation has a way, or XUnit has a way to basically combine these tests in a way that there'll be one failure test that will just feed in parameters for each of these and assert that it fails. So I'll be like, hey, like, yeah, you did the job, but like, it's not good enough for me. Like, it needs to be better than this, right? So I say, hey, please use inline data, because again, I'm aware that this exists when there are multiple assertions against the validator, and I'll paste that in. All right, so then it regenerates. So you can see now it's combined a lot of these tests. So now I've got a single title test where now what it's doing, it's feeding in each of those variations of min and max length, and then one parameter that says if it's valid, and then doing a branch here. So this is already a step in the right direction, right? Because now you can see, like, I can see all of my title validations in one location and all the data it's using at one time. And it essentially feeds in this one, runs a test, feeds in that one, runs a test, and just kind of loops through. So yeah, look, the file's, much shorter, far simpler. I'm pretty confident this is probably fully valid and will work exactly as expected too. So yeah, that's kind of the end of these proofs of concepts. The idea here was, again, kind of just to show realistic-ish scenarios that are obviously simplified, but due to time and complexity, you can't really do super complicated things, but this type of stuff, asking it to improve, and I could even write another, message and be like, hey, could you refactor this further? Is there a better idea? I can take it or not, right? So yeah, those are kind of all the different tools it has. It's kind of like a lot of other ones, but kind of has a different flavor. So, and there are also multiple models. This model specifically is the latest model. This one is supposed to be very good for writing tasks, obviously not applicable to programming. And this one is one of the older models. So yeah, that concludes kind of the end of this. Is there any questions?
No, you're good, Matt. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're here to talk about Amazon Q. I heard some people earlier mentioning Code Whisperer from Amazon, which was the original name of the product, was Code Whisperer. And what they did, they've rebranded a lot of their AI things under Amazon Q. So there's Q that handles like internet searches and things. There's the reporting tools have Q, QuickSight. This is specifically the developer focused tool is what we're talking about. Not switching slides. There we go. Okay. So yeah, architect. I've been at this for a long time. I know we're a little bit behind, so I'm going to try to go a little bit quick. But this used to be Code Whisperer, like I said. So you kind of had the slide at the beginning, right? There's a lot of statistics. Pretty much everyone's citing the same statistics. These things are getting great ROI, right? There's a certain number of people are scared of them. A certain number of people think they're great. Some people are scared of us, think they're going to take jobs. We've seen some really cool demos, but the deeper you go, the more holes you start seeing very quickly. So, we're nowhere near needing to worry about jobs going away. It's just making people more productive. But these
this 40% developer productivity is pretty impressive statistic, right? Like, Stack Overflow probably gave these kind of improvements over just searching the internet. There were a lot of there were a lot of tools out there before Stack Overflow, but you had wrong answers. So the ratings was a big difference. This is kind of the next piece. So I'm going to kind of break this into 4 parts that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about quickly writing Flask app using chat, which was kind of like we just saw with Claude. I do think Claude does an exceptional job. If you're doing greenfield development, you're just starting from scratch. That UI is beautiful. It's fast. It is really hard to beat. I'm going to go show, I'm a coder, I'm in the code, and I'm saying, I need to add something simple here. So I start, let's say, coding a health check. I'll go through that. Sorry, completing thoughts. Adding a task of coding a health check. I'm going to do it both ways. And then explain code, right? So a lot of times we're looking at code, we're thinking, what's this to, right? There's people that write a lot of complexity, referencing pointers and parsing things in weird ways. I don't know how many people use data frames versus lists and dictionaries and such, right? You can get into a lot of different syntax to accomplish the same thing in almost every language out there. So it does pretty well at explaining code. Another thing I want to point out is, and this was earlier, we were talking about this. I had this slide, you can put on my other link. It is in the console. It's in VS Code, Eclipse. There's a command line version. It's also in the AWS console. When you're in the AWS console, I can do things like explain my bill cost this month, what services were used the most, right? It doesn't break this down, fantastic, but you can see it gave a pretty good answer there, right? If I'm just trying to look at my bill, assuming I have access, it's going to kind of let me chat with some of the AWS services. These kind of things are continually improving. I've not seen a use case where that's really surprised me how great it does, but it does basic questions, right? If you're not familiar with console, it probably will help you get faster in the console to find things. So I'm going to flip to VS Code. And what I have here is I've got a dev container. Has anyone used dev containers before? Okay, about half. No? Okay. So dev containers are either remote or local, basically a Docker image that is configured. So let me just show real quick. I've got a Docker image that's pulling Python version 3.12, and that is this entire system. It's a local directory for the files. So if I rebuild this, I've got a clean VS Code install, which is pretty nice sometimes. So this is basically what you would do if you're a brand new user. Find Amazon Q, install it. I do want to point out, we talked about using the tools that you can get third-party tools. That's great. Some of them work phenomenal, but do realize, and it was mentioned, but I think it's worth stressing, those third-party tools have access to your workspace. They have access to your private files. They might have access to your secrets if they're in your source code. Of course, we should never have secrets in source code instead of a secret manager, but it happens a lot. So you want to watch where you're getting these plugins from for any of your editors, but we're talking about VS Code. So what I'm going to do here, that's installed. I'm going to go down. It gives me an option to use for free with a builder IG, free to register for a personal profile from AWS or get a pro license. That's going to do the usual pop-up in VS Code to sign in. And this is, if you use AWS SSO or things, might look familiar. Grant access. It's been approved. And now I can go into the chat and I can do things, right? I can start with the chat. I can start with code. I can start with tasks also, but I'm just going to start with, and I'm going to do simpler demos to try to stay on time, but how would I create a Flask app that says, hello world, right? Obviously very simple. This is going to kind of walk me through what to do. So if I don't know Flask, this might be very helpful. If I know Flask, less helpful, but I'm just going to copy paste these things. I'm going to copy paste this one, I should say. And it's outputting as I type, so I missed that. But we're going to go install Flask. It's going to tell me I need to create an app.py file. So we will go create that. There is a way to do this without typing these, but I'm going to show this one first. We're going to insert that at the cursor. So now we have an app.py. That's interesting. That's the first time I've seen it generate bad code with HTML mixed in. Okay, so the app.py has HTML mixed in the Python code. Please reach. Really simple one for it to make that wrong. But these things make mistakes, right? So one thing you have to remember is all of these coding assistants, and eventually we will get where they're not like this. But today, they're like hiring a college intern who is extremely arrogant, has lied about everything on his resume, and will not tell you when they don't know something ever, no matter what. They will exaggerate and feed you whatever they think you'll believe and sound very convincing while they're doing it. Okay, so did it give me an app.py? Okay, this time it gave it to me. So very interesting. So there we go. It tells me I need to run Python app.py. This gives me a development server, open a browser, right? Hello world. Not rocket science. We've already seen some demos that are more complicated, but this gives you an idea of what you can do. But let's say I'm now developing this app. If I was in a chat, I'm kind of stuck at this point, right? I can't be in here working. So let's say I start making a comment that says, well, it's going to suggest what I should add, but that's not what I'm going to add. Add a health check on the URL that checks I have 1 GB of disk space free, right? So when I say that, it's going to take a second, and I've done this like 15 times saying, what are the chances it's not going to come up with something right? That is hilarious. Okay, so check the disk space is over 1 GB free. If not, throw a 500 error.
This is going great. Do you know which model this one is using on the back end?
It's something Amazon, but it does use their Claude. They're doing a lot of things with Claude, but they don't disclose what model that I've seen anywhere. So we're just going to blow this away. We are going to.
Doesn't like your summer intern comment.
Yeah, it heard me and is pissed off, and it is messing with me now. Okay, so we're just going to start over. That's a nice thing about dev containers, is that I can wipe out my machine. I can start over, sign back in. Hopefully it forgets who I am, forgets my comment from earlier. Should have said summer intern comment at the end. But this is what it's like, right? In real life, right? We have days these things pull off absolute miracles, and we have days that you just look at your screen and wonder what we're paying them for. Add a health check on /healthy that returns, that throws a 500 error if less than 1 GB disk space free. Try again. Okay, that looks much better. So we're going to use this library, right? Did you notice here, it may have done that and I not noticed at the top. It may have done it twice, or it may have been there earlier and I didn't take it out, not sure which, but had 2 imports there. But so we're gonna check the disk space. If it's less than 1 GB, then we're going to abort with a 500 error, otherwise return okay, right? As I'm a developer and typing in my code, that's really nice how it just kind of continued my thought with, here's what you're about to type. There was an interesting presentation at reInvent where they were talking about how do you predict when the developer is taking enough of a break that you can give them a suggestion without just burning a bunch of GPU time, needlessly doing things as they're typing, right? So there's a lot of tuning in that kind of middle ground, right? So sometimes you wait, sometimes as you're typing and thinking, it's popping up. It will finish comments, it'll finish code, it will do all kinds of things. It's quite interesting how much it can predict what you're doing. The more logical your thoughts are, the more it seems to be follow your pattern. If you are just spewing out random nonsense in your code in no order, it definitely doesn't work as well. So let's see. So that threw me off some. So let's take this out. And now I want to do that same thing a different way. So we've now saved this code. I'm going to go here and go into dev mode, which plan a new functionality. Now, in this case, add a URL /healthy, which returns okay if there is at least 1 GB of disk space available. If not, then throw a 500 error. Now, this one's really interesting. This, if you think like you get a requirement from in your Jira card or something, right? Let's say this is a requirement. I just put this in here. It's going to go out and it's going to have multiple agents on the back end talking to each other. So kind of multiple AIs talking to each other, trying to figure out what are the steps to solve this. This is when AIs get really scary, is when they talk to each other and figure things out. But here's its proposal, right? I suggest the following: import the required modules, add a new function called check disk space, implement the function, create a new function healthy, decorate it with routes, check disk space, return 500. Right? I can iterate on this. So I've used 9 out of 10 of my iterations. Sorry, 9 out of 10 are remaining. Or I can say, go generate the code. Okay, take a couple minutes to go generate code. Of course, this is a simple example, right? And I do want to point out all of these tools while it's doing this, all these tools are kind of heading for the same goals, right? Each one's attacking in a different order of what they're trying to do. So you'll see some do great with greenfield development. Q, so-so and starting from scratch, but really handy if I'm editing my code. So it is going to go out and think and think and think. And what it's going to come back with is basically a git patch file that tells me what all the files are it would change. And it will eventually come back. So hopefully in just a second. But what do you guys think while that's thinking? What
Why
questions
wasn't
do we?
it so much quicker in line when it was suggesting it, and it takes so much longer?
Well, this version where I'm saying go make a plan and go implement the plan, that takes a lot more time.
Okay.
And you only
You
get a
told
few
it
of those a
make
month.
plan. That's,
I told it go make a plan and go execute the plan. Yep.
you should repeat the question.
Yep. So here we go. It decided that it's going to add HTTP status. It's going to add a function. Move this so you can see my screen better. 2 times 30. That seems like way too big of a number. But you see it basically got it, right? So it returned HTTP okay, or it returned server error. So that went on and did it. And that did it from plain English, from a requirement that's really a business analyst requirements. Now, when I'm iterating on that, I still have to do that. If I had a much harder task, it would come back, probably take many more iterations than one. And I'll brainstorm with what it says the plan is, and then it'll go generate the code. It has access to the whole workspace, and that's setting all my files up to a limit to try to generate this. So, yeah, and I've got code iterations. I can do another one. Yeah, and that should have saved. Yep. So that's saved in my workspace now. And right, yeah. So let me go back to timing wise. Let's see, where was my presentation? Where'd my presentation go? Oh, this is my presentation. It's not a console. So that's what I showed. How it does this varies each time, right? But I showed the typing. That was the plan. This is one of the really interesting use cases, is the code transformations. So in this example, Java 8 to Java 17, right? This takes a huge amount of time to do all the upgrades when you have 1,000+ applications, right? Who wants to spend their day upgrading from Java 8 to 17? For some reason, we're not all signing up for this role. So with the tool, it's doing some loops to the next slide, but they average 10 minutes per application and 2 days to upgrade these. So I think this is a really interesting use case, right? I don't think anyone likes this. We get a ton of security patches that is, go upgrade this library. Suddenly things don't work. Dependabot helps a lot with it, depending on your code. But, we have this. And behind the scenes, this is what they say it's doing, is taking your source code, it's running a build server to check it and run all your unit tests. It's then looping over a knowledge base that Amazon keeps of how to fix things, and tries to convert Java 17, fixes errors, and just kind of keeps looping this process of what do we know both in the LLM and our knowledge base that our employees have done, kind of use a RAG system to get those, and eventually comes out with upgraded code that in theory usually works. Do we want to do this last? We said we were going to talk about these.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of,
Let me get through them quick. Okay, so context varies. It's usually the files that are open is the default. I can say tag my whole workspace in the chat and it'll do some kind of RAG on it. I'm not sure exactly what it does. Models, I don't see public. Behavior doesn't really learn, but it does see what I'm typing. Integrates with VS Code, JetBrains, console, CLI in the paid SageMaker versions in there. Code Catalyst. There isn't a plugin model though to add things to it. Security and privacy. I'd recommend you read the page, right? All of these are complex. Obviously, all the free ones would like to train on your data. So if you're using the free Q developer, you do have to opt out of them using your training data, but it is an option to opt out. Let's see. There are some directions to lock it down tighter. The cost is, the one I was using was free. And then there's a $19 a month version, which does have indemnity included in the paid service for the code it generates. So, thank you.
All right, so just a little bit about me. So I solve big data, enterprise AI, ML problems at scale. I recently took a sabbatical where I dove deep into generative AI. I see a couple of familiar faces from when I gave a presentation here at the May Roundup, at the May Roundtable, where I talked about a generative AI embeddings project that I'd worked on. And we'll actually circle back to that kind of at the end of this. So research, I think we covered that in the other slides. Key features, the ones I'm going to talk about today are code completion and the Copilot chat. So this just dives right into it, right? So the first thing is, I call this quote code completion. Notice that what we're looking at here on screen, and I'll go ahead and let this video run, is it's just text data. It happens to be data that's CSV delimited. But just notice as I start interacting with this. Right, so earlier we saw examples of people typing in comments, people typing in code, what ends up happening as the inline as you're doing that. So that's the extent of this little video here, but I want to break it out to show a little more detail of, okay, what actually happened in this little clip, right? So the first part of it was comment completion. Steve, I love your description of the yappy intern, right? Because notice what it did, right? What did it do? I put in a comment. The first thing it did was it put in a comment that was break out each sub item under, which actually was off screen and you couldn't see it, but it was a variation of a comment that I had at the top of the file. It just substituted in a different variable, which was actually pretty clever. Then I started typing in budget year, year 6. And if you notice, I had lines budget 1 through 5. So then when I said 6, it said, oh, through 10, I know what we're doing. They're like, no, no, no. And then I said does, and it said, oh, does not exist in the data. And you can see it keeps trying to get ahead of me in terms of comments, right? Does not appear in the JSON, does not apply to the data source, does not apply to this other data type. Finally, I end up getting it to the point of, okay, as I'm filling this out, it like, okay, fine. It takes me that many characters to get the comment up to the point of what I was actually trying to get at. So in terms of comment completion, I find it tends to be pretty good. Again, similar to the earlier comment of, depending on how closely aligned your comments are to what is already there. Yeah, actually, I mean, to me, this is like an 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. If anyone remembers the first feeling that they had when they used IntelliSense when that first came out, it's kind of amazing. That's my reaction to this, right? The next part of this, and this was a little bit subtle to catch in the video, but this mapping line completion, the thing about this was, it's talking about this budget year, source docs, line item, et cetera, was my comment says it does not apply to these P18 items. there were 3 different things in this block that were off screen. One of them referenced P18. It actually removed the P18 one, right? So imagine it said, you know, A comma B comma, A, B, and C, but I said don't include B. Like the autocomplete just included A and C, which was actually really cool, right? The fact that it kind of figured that out just based on my comment, right? And again, this is not something where it's like, oh, this isn't Python code, right? This is just an arbitrary, mapping file that I made up. So I really do think this is like IntelliSense on steroids. Comment level anticipation was great. It was able to understand enough of this thing that it was able to correctly drop a sub portion there. For the next demo, I want to talk about code completion. So as the setup, notice I've got a block of code. I've got a couple defined methods in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm saying, hey, I want to add another method, and I start typing out what the name is. And we saw examples of this before, where oh look, it very quickly says, oh, I know what you're trying to do. In this case, what it thinks I'm trying to do is extract the last element from a list, but really I'm trying to extract the last n characters from that, right? So at first it doesn't get the comment quite right, but then once it does get the comment right, it then provides updated code that matches what my real intent was. Right, so again, code completion number 1, okay, it kind of gets ahead of itself a little bit, but that's fine. That's actually pretty interesting based on just the name of the method. Then code completion 2, notice that what I've done is I have updated the comment, and simply by updating the comment, it's now, the suggested code snippet underneath matches what my comment is. Okay, third is chat. So in GitHub Copilot, there's a chat interface here. So what I can do is, in this case, what I did was I selected the method that I had just written and said, hey, you know what, go ahead and explain this for me. It gets pretty yappy, right? So explain that, and then you can type in your question, or if you're lazy, you can just click on the question that it says, hey, here's a follow-up question. So there's a few different things that end up following through here. I'll kind of jump ahead in the interest of time. So question 1 was explain what this is. Then the second was give me some example usage in terms of the explanation. The method, remember the method we were talking about was extracting the last 5 characters. Its sample use case has JSON data where it's pulling out the last 5 characters of a username. That's pretty cool that it was able to figure that out. So question 3, modify the code. What if the field's not found, or what if you want to modify it to raise an exception, right? So a variation. So one other thing I'm going to mention here, I'm not actually going to demo this. There's not a video here, but the commit message in Git, you can do something like, hey, generate comments for the Git commit message. Boom, there it is. Right. Or this little thing here, generate commit message with Copilot, also is an option. Let me pause there. In the interest of time, I'm going pretty quickly. Does that all make sense? Any questions about that so far? Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Sorry to pick.
Yeah, go for it. I love it.
I see a lot of numbers, 40%, 50%.
Yeah.
And looking at the code, what we saw in the company that I work at is the 40% is way too high. And the code that it generates when you just give it a prompt and say like build a routine is not idiomatic language. And so if you were to like actually put that into like, if you were to commit that, if you were to do a pull request with that code, you would spend the next week reading the comments from people about how bad your code is.
Yeah. So I think just to restate this for other folks, I think the comment and really question was along the lines of, hey, at the beginning you referenced this, quote, unbiased data of how easy is it to use and how useful is it, right? Kind of going back to one of the themes we've been talking about all along, which is code quality. What's the quality of these tools? There's definitely a human in the loop at this point, in my opinion, right? This is not, and this was referenced earlier, I'm not concerned at all about these tools taking developers' jobs. anytime soon. I think what you are going to see, though, is you're going to start to see a gap between developers who use these technologies versus those that don't.
And I guess where my question comes from
Yeah.
is like, are we, like, everybody who's, like, all 4 presentations are kind of using the same style of prompts?
Mhm.
Is there a style of prompting that's more like a line by line kind of prompting, where you know kind of what you want to achieve, but maybe not how to achieve it, and the line by line maybe gives you better or more accurate outcome?
So let's actually let's have a little fun here. How's that sound? Does everyone?
One thing on your slide is
Yeah.
really neutral, right? If you read that last one, 80% of participants successfully adopted Copilot, 96 success rate. 43% found it easy to use. We're not talking about code quality, right? But it was easy to use. 67% used it 5 days a week, right? Like it makes jobs more pleasant for many people, right? But it often still needs that code review you're saying. I give an example of, I think it was last week or so. I told it simplify some code that was messy, and it wrote this Python code that everyone in the room looked at and was like, does that work? Like, yes, it's a lot less lines. We asked for simpler and more readable. And no one in the room was sure if it would work or not. We tested it, it did work. But like, you're right, it's not the language.
That talk on simple versus. So.
Yeah. Yeah, go for it.
Show it that.
Right.
Question, not just for you, but for all the presenters. Everybody keeps saying, there's no way this is taking our jobs.
Yeah.
I was talking to a lot of junior developers, and it is taking their jobs. And in order to become a senior developer, like this, you need to be a junior developer first. So these tools are actually destroying the next generation of senior developers, from what I'm hearing and what I've seen. What's your opinion on that?
That's actually a really good thought. And in terms of looking around the audience, I think we probably are all giving a skewed answer to that question. And thanks for raising that. Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
I want to summarize what's been discussed to this point because people online can't follow us.
Yeah, so sorry for folks on the
sorry.
online. Yeah, just what have we been talking about? So in the past couple of minutes, we've been talking about these tools, ease of use, and whether or not they would have an impact on developer jobs. So sorry, did you have a follow-up question or comment to that?
I have a comment for what you said, because I had that experience this week. We have a new developer.
Yeah.
At the job. So he generated some React code,
Mhm.
And then he said, you know what, it's not doing what I want. So he said, hey, can you help me out? And I was like, what are you trying to achieve? I'm just trying to, like display this table. And when the user clicks, you get into details, the regular stuff.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, let me see the code. When I saw the code, I was like, I was like, okay, you know what? This thing is good to generate the code, but you need to understand, right?
Yeah.
What's going on behind.
Mhm.
So it took a lot of hours for me, that junior, in order to do it. So in the end, I was like, you know what? I have an example like this in GitHub. Let's go there, copy, paste it, and then later we can like dig it in, right?
Yeah.
Because we have to deliver this by the end of the week.
Yes.
In fairness, junior developers can generate code like that without it.
Right.
So one last thing that I'll have here, and this is something for us to do together. This is actually the presentation that I showed back in May. It was the short version of it is I used embeddings, I downloaded 30,000 pairs of glasses, and I did similarity search. So what I did was I downloaded all these glasses. I then said, let me take each of these 30,000 pairs of glasses, get an embedding for the image. Then what I can do is I can say, find similar, and then it'll find me similar looking glasses, right? So it's doing it based on this L2 Euclidean distance score, right? So some of the examples we've looked at so far have been greenfield development. What I want us to do here is to say, let's actually go in and modify this page and see if we can't do something different with GitHub Copilot.
I want to point out too.
Yeah.
Example of you had the React code in GitHub do something similar. We could use the same embedding search to say, let's index all the code we have in the enterprise and find something similar, right? And it will do pretty amazing at finding something, which is why places like Google panic when ChatGPT got popular. It's not just about right? The fact these searches suddenly are in the hands of everybody is worrisome to a lot of companies.
So along those lines, so forgetting just going into a public, doing a search like that, right? But within the enterprise, anybody have any success or has tried? Go in, look at your enterprise code and see if you can find common services to reuse or common codes to reuse.
Did Facebook did that? Someone did that. Someone did similar to that, but they set up a lot of agents, a lot of people that AI is talking to AIs to try to bounce around ideas. I mean, you can do the similarity search with embeddings and potentially find across documentation what's similar, and then have a human
Well, there's
maybe
no
look at it.
documentation.
Well, there's at
Must
least
be
like
written
a
for, like, last
Swagger
20
or open
years.
API specs or something, or just absolutely nothing.
Who knows?
Okay,
Let's put it that.
that would be challenging. Then.
Yeah, so the other thing is on the numbers. Sure, there's percentage of, 68% of developers are using this, right? But how many, what's the percentage do we know? Who's actually putting that code into production?
I don't know.
I think that's a key. Almost every
Yeah.
place that I've gone, I am in the federal space, right? Everybody talks a big game about using this stuff, right? But then when you really start asking questions, they're barely playing around with the technology. The only places that we've seen some of this stuff go is DoD, that they don't want to talk about it, or NASA.
Well, we do know that the example of the Amazon code transformations, the upgrades, was 1,000+ production applications that were deployed
Where?
inside Amazon. So, but Amazon.com, not AWS potentially, but not writing code from it, just upgrades. Definitely a distinction there.
So nobody has been exposed to the real thing. The job. That was like.
Nobody wants to say it.
Right.
It's a mystery.
So going back to the, we've looked at some greenfield examples. This is more of a, hey, you have existing code, right? This is in Copilot. You can, sorry, let me move this out of the way. So then in here, I can get the little, where's the little AI guy?
While you're searching, I have answered to a question. I know quite a few developers working for large companies.
Yeah.
Without announcing this, but actually half of their code that they submit to the enterprise repositories, it's written by AI. So companies don't exactly know that, but yeah, they have this kind of code.
That's
Oh.
scary.
Hopefully they have good code reviews, and if it truly is bad, that's good. Now, if
The companies still exist, so.
yeah,
The software is still fresh.
the other thing you have to worry about is if the code is copyright and comes out reciting what it was trained on.
Your sunglasses.
Yeah.
You had used something that's called an L2 to describe that.
Sure. Actually, why don't we take that offline? Just its short version is Euclidean distance. You can also look at cosine similarity. Euclidean distance, also known as L2. It's part of the Facebook AI similarity search library. They're implementing Euclidean distance for that. But for example, just in here, you could say, remember, we're looking at these different cards. We could say something like update the following code to include the price in the upper right-hand corner of the card. What else should we do? Make it in a yellow triangle. Let's do yellow square. Sure. Right. So okay. So GitHub is getting a little chatty here. It looks like the way that I set this up, I did this as an insertion rather than a replace. So sure, let's accept that. But then I'm going to have to come down here and get rid of the second half of this file. So if we want to check this, let's run it again. Right. Let's fire it back up. Here's our page. How'd we do? I'm not, so that's, sorry, that's here. This is the fun with live demos. Going back to sample, this is the page that we modified. Here's the yellow. Yeah. So not terrible, right? And then you can continue to iterate from there. Hey, modify this, modify that. Okay, so again, in the interest of time, here are kind of the main themes. We've got a table around it. Jeff, did you want to jump in with anything else?
Yeah,
Or
wrap up, so I'll-
okay, perfect. I will give you the ball.
Cool. So we were here when the beginning of the night. And unless, okay, so nobody can read this. I'm not saying you should be able to read this, but we have this, and it's a good artifact for you all to have. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put it up on somehow on the meetup that we have. So you'll have the original PDF. You can read through it. So you can take pictures of it, but you don't necessarily have to. My suggestion, we have good feedback here, good conversation. I'm pretty sure the meetup website itself, you can add comments to our meetup here, and if we can continue the conversation there, asynchronously if people want to. But we're going to post a link to this. There'll be a link to the video of this whole night that we'll get out there in the next couple of days. I'll probably go on and splice it a little bit so we take out some of the spacing and all. But just as these are final thoughts. These are my thoughts. These are not anybody else's. These are just mine. And they're very basic, but we saw 4 examples. My suggestion is almost all of them. I think all of them have some kind of a free version you can use. So give them a try. You might find that you personally like using GitHub Copilot over using the Claude.ai interface, or you might find that the Amazon Q works better because your company's an AWS shop and it just helps you do certain things. So give them a try. Know your use cases. Are you somebody who's trying to you like to learn lots of new things? I mean, that's sort of where I'm at this point in my career, where I'm either trying to learn something new quickly, or I'm trying to help out a project by writing something quickly. And maybe I don't know that particular framework or language, but I can use I do, disclaimer, I do use Copilot Chat more than anything else. In Copilot Chat, I can just ask it questions and it'll help me out. So know what you're trying to get done. Understand the details of use, licensing, security, and privacy. We're consultants and we're working for customers, and it's very important for us to know where is this code going? Is it something that's going to be out there and training other models? What license do we need to get so it doesn't do that? Copilot Business is very different from the default settings of an individual using Copilot. And so we try to understand those things. So while not becoming an expert, you can at least talk about it with your boss, your manager, or your client or customer. And then that was great, all the talk about code reviews, because I knew it was my last bullet point here on the slide. Code reviews are essential. And what I would say is, if you think about using these AI tools, all of you probably are doing code reviews of other people's code, not AI generated code, just your peers. And doing those and getting better at doing just general code reviews of other people's code is going to help you as you generate code from some of these code assistants, because you'll know what you're looking for, and you'll be basically code reviewing a lot of what these tools are generating. So that was sort of my last little bullet point. It was great when y'all were talking about that, because it was feeding into my thoughts.
One small addition, you said give it a try, but give multiple a try.
Yes.
You can run multiple at the same time in VS Code, right? It's different keystrokes for Q Developer and GitHub Copilot. I don't know what the 2
Genie AI.
Genie AI.
Yeah.
Continue is another one that lets you run local LLMs. That's a decent plugin.
Yeah, so Steve was saying, give a lot of them a try, see what resonates with you the best, and you can set them up in, most of us probably use VS Code, in VS Code, sitting right next to each other, and give different ones a try, see which ones you like better. And if there's something that we talked about 4 of them here, there's more. If there's something that you particularly like to use, then like I said, we can continue that sort of in the meetup comment section and see what we all think. So that's a wrap. Thank you everybody for showing up. Really appreciate you coming to this online. Thank you for coming and visiting us here tonight, and to the presenters, Steve, Ryan, Matt, Vikas. Thank you guys for doing this. These guys did it all voluntary. It was on their own time, and we talked a few times before this, but it was great for you guys to help us out here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.